Good evening. You're listening to the Xtreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob. Tonight's episode, it's like a Quinn Martin production. Twin Peaks, Season 1, Episode 5, Xtreme TV. I'm here with Professor Pixel, and as you may know, those of you listening to Twin Peaks, maybe for the first time or watching it on a rewatch like myself, getting a lot out of this. This has been pretty interesting. And Pixel, I want to say that we're now halfway through Season 1 of the original show, some considered by many the best short episode or even Season 1 of all time. I think it's fantastic. I think it's great. I really feel like after watching this episode, though, Episode 5 called The One-Armed Man, that we are definitely in the thick of what this town is. We still get one or two little extra characters and relationships revealed, but I think this episode really floats along at a great pace. It's not necessarily as dark and as deep as others, but it definitely feels like it's moving along at a great pace, and there's plenty of places that we can stop, catch our breath, have some of the characters kind of reiterate what the hell is going on, because so much is that I'm glad they had an episode like this that feels like a catch-up, but yet we're still moving forward. What's your initial take on this episode?
For once, I think I'm going to have to disagree a bit. I didn't dislike this episode, and I absolutely agree with what you said before, that this is a truly great season of television. But as I'm here in location at the side of the road, sign Twin Peaks right there, I have to say this feels a little weaker in some areas. It definitely has its moments, but compared to like even last episode, it felt slightly off. Again, other than a few moments where it really gets into the nitty gritty of itself.
Yeah, I think that's due to, if you're going to support that point, I would support it by saying that that's due to the fact that some of the Twin Peaks isms that we've got to know with the damn fine cup of coffee, the cake, Andy making the sketch and just him being kind of a goof and all what's going on with his relationship. There's going to be some things we don't like and some things we don't. But a lot of the shock and awe of some of the things in the first few episode that would become commonplace that we said, hey, this might look like it's a thing that this show does. There's nothing new with it. So now it's like, okay, what can Twin Peaks right now in Episode 5 do that's really, really, really different? I don't know that there's an answer, because there definitely is not in this episode. This, to your point, if I were to justify, is it's like just another episode, but not as good as the first four in terms of there's nothing new. But I still think it's solid. I still think it's entertaining. So with that, let's just go right into the very first scene. We start off with the crazy woman, wife, Sarah Palmer. She had this dream, and she had this vision, and apparently it's the second one she did, and she's psychotic. And we said that the Palmer family, the parents of Laura Palmer who died, are a little bit off kilter, and it turns out that as that gets mentioned later in this episode, Sarah Palmer is a lady that seems to have visions, and it seems a little kooky, and maybe Laura did as well. So that may seem that the spiritual nature of what's going on in Twin Peaks has a little bit in here, because there's even a scene later on where Cooper is talking about how he didn't want to be there because he's such a strong, I think, receiver and giver of otherworldly phenomenon. They don't really dive deep into it, but it's definitely not going away, the spirituality of it, which I'll leave it at that. But anyway, you're getting this sketch here about it, and the husband says, oh, what about the necklace? And so then they talk about it. So they're immediately jumping right into the investigative part of this rather than relationships, because that's good. I think when they're doing the investigative thing, that's when the episode feels like it's moving forward. When it's the relationships, that's where it kind of lingers. But in here, you've got Maddie coming in, and she's the one that looks like Laura but doesn't. She's going to get more screen time here too. But for me, I don't think there's really that much going on in this first episode here. What's your take on this initial scene?
The initial starting scene, actually, Leland knows. You can feel this tension between them as he's basically exposing her, saying, oh, why don't you tell him about your other visions? She's had two visions. And whenever they go into the necklace, this is the first time that this piece of information is getting to the cops, and that's important. At least I feel. But you're right. There's not a lot in this scene, but actually the next scene fits perfectly with one of the subplots of the show, because as soon as this scene is over, transitions to Invitation to Love, which is
Yeah, and I really like this. Go ahead. This is good.
Yeah, which is the soap opera of the series. It starts out with this woman named Emerald leaned over this guy named Chet, and she has this very showy necklace, which right after we're talking about Laura's necklace, this feels prominent. But Emerald is leaning over and saying, "Don't fight this, Chet." And Chet's like, I can't do this. I'm married to your sister now, Emerald. And that's pretty much it.
Mm-hmm.
But
it's a perfect allegory for what's going on. You're absolutely right, because you've got this doctor that's supposedly involved with this one, and then it's, really her sister, and it's like, okay, well, now we have another relationship to Laura Palmer, and Laura had blonde hair, which, if you want to symbolically say, which we haven't talked symbolism too much in here. We've talked about scenes and stylistic things, but the symbolism, you could sit there and totally argue that as each episode takes place during the day. Here, you've got the dead lady, Laura, blonde hair, like an angel, supposed to be good. And then here's a relative coming in, exactly like her, played, of course, by the same actress, who even has a little conversation later on about certain things. And it's kind of interesting. We'll get to that. But she's got dark hair, and it's just one of those things where it's so obvious. Of course, they're using the TV to kind of hit you on the head with it, and use this transition scene. It's quite common in a lot of movies. Not everybody does it, but right now, I don't think the directors are hiding anything from you. They're showing you, yes, there's something weird going on here with people. Or in this case, if you think of doppelgangers and all that kind of stuff, the plus and minus, the yin yang and all that there's good and evil. There's so many ways that you could say that we're seeing that in this show.
There's also a key factor to Invitation to Love just a second after, because basically the receptionist at the sheriff's department, I can't remember her name.
Lucy.
Yeah, she's watching it. She's the one watching it, and Harry comes in. The sheriff goes up, says, "What's going on?" And she starts talking about the show, and she's talking about how there's a hotel, and they want to destroy the hotel and basically frame somebody for it. But she thinks that the guy that's in with Emerald on the deal is actually going to betray her. And that's a key factor, because I'm using that as a hint to look towards in the show, where who's sleeping with Catherine?
Ben, I think is his name.
Benjamin, yes.
Yeah, Ben.
He potentially, we don't know a lot about him except that he doesn't seem to have a great recollection. Yeah. So he could easily betray Catherine, and I'm going to use Lucy's judgment to look for that in the show, because it absolutely connects. We learned that in the last episode when the cousin got introduced. Right after in the show, they're going through characters. One woman's playing two characters, which is the case here.
Exactly. It literally is a metaphor for the entire show. And to your point, if those that are paying attention to that, it's exactly 1-to-1. The plot was something being destroyed, this, like of Josie's Mill. So I think that's a good point too, which brings us to the next scene, which they finally, and again, this is more than halfway through the end of the first season here, we get Dr. Jacoby, who's in there, who is seeing Laura. We know he's the one that took the necklace, I think, from the end of the first episode or beginning of the second episode. We see that he's the one that has it, I think in the coconut, maybe end of the second episode. So we've known for several episodes he's got it, so we're just waiting on that piece of information we recall, and they go to talk about his relationship with her, not necessarily the necklace or whatever. I don't think there was anything going on in the scene that really stood out to me, other than the line that he says, because he can't really say much because he's a doctor. He can play that little scheme thing, and he kind of has his own weirdo surfs up philosophy, and he's talking with Cooper kind of about it, and he just says, "Hey, look, Bobby and James are boys. Laura was a woman, basically saying that, she, it's not even close to the level kind of playing field of the type of things that Laura would be interested in. So you see in some sort of perverse way the Doctor's fascination with Laura too, and you almost believe it the way this guy pulls it off. And he's a bit of a goof, but it's just a little back and forth between him and Cooper. But to me, it doesn't really do anything. I don't think it's a bad thing. It just is sort of there.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I felt like it was going back almost, because at the end of the last episode, we had Dr. Jacoby talking to Dale, and he was in that moment. You could feel that he felt deeply for Laura's death. He felt guilt. He felt shame. And there were things there that you could clearly see. And in a snap, he's back to his old goofy, kind of utterly ridiculous self. And it was kind of disappointing. The only other thing that I mentioned, like in my notes, when I watch, I go ahead and take notes. One important fact is that the night that Laura was killed, he was following a man in a red Corvette and lost him at the mill. But other than that, no, it's kind of disappointing almost.
Well, we'll see if it turns into anything, because right now it just seems like it's there. And so, Cooper's like, asked Truman about the Corvette that he mentions after he leaves, and sort of like, yeah, this is, they had guys trailing Jacques Renault, the French dude or whatever. And they got a phone call from his supervisor with an update on the twine, saying, but the twine, the two different types don't match. She had bird bites on her shoulders. Albert, of course, the guy that had a little bit of a run into with Truman and all that, he's not on scene here, but he's reconstructing, if you will, a profile of the piece of plastic, whatever it was that was in Laura's stomach, is coming too. So a lot of this show, basically, are factoids that are advancing the key elements, are coming basically from phone calls. I don't hate that. I think sometimes it's better in person, but that does seem to work in this episode, because it seems like it's saying, okay, we are moving forward with the murder. We know that there's a lot of relationship stuff that the show takes its time on. But I do appreciate that, because they sat on it. I think it would be losing momentum. So the thing to me is that we talked about the name of the episode being the One-Armed Man. And, Andy's, even though he's a bit of a doofus, okay, Lucy, maybe she is, they're having issues or whatever like that. They'll get to that confrontation a little bit with each other a little bit. But Cooper recognizes the photo that Andy had made, and that's, hey, this is Bob. And then Hawk, who we see actually a lot of in this episode, because we don't want to forget about him, it's easy to sometimes, he says, hey man, I've seen this one-armed man at this motel, and they're going to go meet him. But when they get there, we see Josie, who owns the Packard mill. She's sitting in a car and she's taking photos of stuff, because inside you've got Catherine and Benjamin, who you were asking about earlier. These two are having an affair or whatever. They're talking about, how great they are switching the books, and he's basically talking about, hey, this is what we need to do and how to do it, as far as burning the mill down and getting it torched. We don't know how it's going to go down, but we know why they're doing it. It's not a surprise at all. So all these little things are kind of moving forward here. I don't know why this is in here. I don't know if it's comedy relief or something later, but when they knock on a door for the One-Armed Man, because they don't know Catherine and Benjamin are in this other room, but we do as a viewer. Andy's gun, when they pull it, he just mishandles and it drops, it fires or whatever, and it's just sort of there. But then when they burst in, there's this guy in there. He's got the One-Armed Man, or he's the One-Armed Man. He's got one arm with it, and it's funny because while they're talking, what I really liked about this scene to me is I liked that this guy was not menacing. He was the complete opposite. Philip Gerard from the TV show The Fugitive back in the 60s, one of the highest rated shows of all time, especially the final episode. It's Richard Kimball, who supposedly killed his wife. He was a man on the run. It's a Quinn Martin production. Fantastic show we've mentioned before. The person chasing him was named Lieutenant Philip Gerard, and here they say Philip Gerard is the One-Armed Man. So it's just kind of a lift off and honoring this old show, I guess. I don't know why their personal interest in it was in there, but it's the connection is quite obvious that they wrote it in. But it's kind of neat because he's this traveling shoe salesman. He's actually kind of like nice guy. He's friendly. He's likable. He's a little sensitive or whatever like that, because they're really going through his crap. They're checking his car out. They're badgering him. They're telling him to calm down. He's sitting on the bed. They're standing kind of over him. It's kind of almost intimidating. And he says how he lost his arm or whatever. And then the best thing about it is they're like, "Did you have a tattoo on your arm?" And he goes, "Yes." And they're like, "What did it say?" And he goes, "Mom." And he starts crying.
Mom.
You're like, I totally believe this guy. No, this whole scene was really, really cool. I liked them a lot. And at the end of it, of course, Hawk said, "Hey, I saw this car. Josie was in it." And I think the only other piece of news is that when Catherine and Benjamin were checking things out or whatever, we see that when Benjamin went to the shower, something fell out of his jacket after they were making sweet, sweet love. And it's a poker chip that says One-Eyed Jacks. So what's your take on this? I think this is a really good scene.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of points in there. I'm glad that it started out really with showing Josie there taking pictures, and you're like, what is she doing? Why? Then as soon as we go into the room, we absolutely understand. So while this game, we've talked about it before, the subplot with the mill is kind of meh. It doesn't get into the real meat of it, which is the death of Laura Palmer and what's behind that. We think it's kind of we could do without it. But I'm glad that it's progressing, as these two, they know that each other they basically have dirt that they have on each other, and it's continuing to flow, which I feel is important. If you're going to have a subplot, at least keep it going along. I don't know why they showed the One-Eyed Jack scene. I guess it could point to, like we talked before with Invitation to Love, these two are in business together. Lucy thinks that people in the show, the guy's going to basically betray him, Emerald, which is Catherine in this case. But Catherine is desperately in love with Ben. Absolutely. And One-Eyed Jacks isn't exactly the place you want your lover to be. So if it's trying to give her,
I think she was surprised by it. Yeah. You think she's really in love with him? I think she's mean. I think she's evil. But I think he's evil too. And I just don't know if they know how evil the other person is. Yeah.
She's evil, but she's infatuated with him. In her entire body language, it seems like she is absolutely devoted to him. And again, I could be wrong. And maybe she could be playing him all along, and she's just a phenomenal actress. And
I think they're both just playing each other, and they know it, but they're both consciously knowing that they're not trying to say that to the other, otherwise it won't work. But I don't know either. That's just my take on it. Because I think she's acting great, but they're both bastards. They really are.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. I do not disagree. The one-armed man was not what we expected at all. You're absolutely right. And the stupid gun scene. In my notes throughout, I know his name is oh man, I actually put it down.
Andy?
But Andy. All I put down though was Deputy Dumbass all over the place, because every scene, you don't know how this guy got to become a deputy. There's a ton of people in town that would be better for this job than Andy. It's just kind of frustrating.
And just one of those things, I guess. I mean, we'll see. Maybe some of these things we don't think make sense right now, or just filler, will later. I don't know. Maybe the show will pivot and turn to certain things. It's hard to say, because not all these timelines or these plot lines are going to, I think, all convene exactly at the same place. I mean, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Some go faster than others. Some resolve, some won't. And I really can't tell what's going on here as far as the pacing of each one. So I don't it's hard to say. Some of the plot lines only get maybe a 5-second shot of what's going on. Others get a couple minutes, and then it's not the same in the next episode. I don't hate that, but we'll see. Why don't you take us through these next couple scenes coming up? We get an interesting one between Donna and Audrey in the girls' room, smoking in the girls' room. Not smoking in the boys' room.
Only Audrey is actually smoking in the girls' room.
Smoking's going on in the girls' room.
That's right. It's supposed to be the boys. Didn't they get the message? There's an entire song about it.
2 actually, but who's counting?
You. Donna is putting on makeup, and basically Audrey is she has a way of acting towards other people.
I love it.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely entertaining. And as she's talking to Donna, she basically hints, well, wouldn't you just want some mysterious guy to steal you away? And Donna's like, do you mean the FBI agent? And Audrey, we know she's infatuated with Dale. And she clearly is interested in being swept away by this man. But she thinks that she can get him to fall in love with her if she finds out who killed Laura. And basically, she's saying, I want you to help me to Donna. And Donna's like, okay, but shouldn't we just leave that to them? And she's like, no. And I have all the facts I need. She's going into nose candy, stuff like that.
Yep.
But she suspects that it's all connects to her father's department store because there's a place called One-Eyed Jack's where girls go to work. And the one girl who was kidnapped and raped like
Ronette.
Laura, but survived.
Yeah, Ronette. Mm-hmm.
She worked at the perfume counter, and Audrey suspects maybe Laura worked there too. And that's where she's going to start. After that, did you take anything from those scenes, from that scene?
Just 2 quick comments. One is I really like this because I like when people buddy up somehow that you don't think might be, and they try to figure stuff out. I pop hard on that. I think that's kind of cool. The only thing I didn't get here is because Donna's a bit of a snoozer to me. I don't hate her, but there's something about her I don't necessarily care for. I don't understand why she wants to be secret. When Audrey's saying, hey, we both, want to know, and, it's good for us if we figure out the truth. And I really think Audrey's sincere about it, even though I think Audrey's smart enough to know that if she's fantasizing about Cooper, it's not going to happen, but she wants to do it anyway because she's got daddy issues. She's got nobody to impress, and seems smart in a whimsical sort of way or whatever. I don't know, but I like them. I think, okay, fine. Like, some people are going to team up besides the adults in the room and figure it out. I just don't understand why Donna doesn't seem to want to tell anybody, or maybe that's the way they wrote it, or the way it came across to me is, okay, let's just figure out for us so we can have closure and clarity with it. I mean, even though Audrey obviously wants to tell Cooper, Donna's got to know that. So I was like, oh, okay. I mean, I did like the scene though, because I'm like, okay, great. I can't wait to see what these 2 ladies, their point of view, how they choose to tackle it. And Audrey, let's be honest, with what, as much as not being in touch as Audrey's been with a lot of people on a very deep level, we've only seen her on the periphery a little bit. She's as far advanced along in terms of facts about things as the police are, and the police are relying mostly on spiritual dreams. So you could argue that she's just as far as along. So I've got no problems with it. We'll see what happens with that.
Yeah. Well, the other big, I feel like this might be one of the biggest distractions of the episode, at least whenever first watching this scene. We have Norma's husband, Hank, and he's basically talking to Norma. He gets out with his parole officer, and he's going to his hearing, and he's saying to Norma, I need you to help me. I need out of here. I'm going to be a changed man. I really need you, Norma.
Really believable.
Yeah. And you have Norma just kind of, you can tell she's pretty suspicious of him. She's not exactly happy to be there, but it goes right into the hearing. And as he's pleading, the judges basically go to Norma, and they're like, how can you assist him? If he's out in the free world, it's going to be a while for him to adjust back to it. How will you help him? And she says, well, I own the double R, and I can give him a job. And I think the boss is pretty fair. She's the boss. So. And they ask, and if he's out, will you be living as man and wife? And she's like, well, I am his wife. And there's just one other thing that I really noticed, because the hearing's pretty much done. You see Hank playing with a domino in his fingers, and it pretty much ends there.
A pair of threes. That was just a pair of threes, which for the Los Angeles Lakers fans of the 80s will recognize as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's number, so it's stuck in my mind. I'm like, okay, domino MFer. He's looking to get out. He comes across as not stupid. I'm not going to say he comes across as imitating, but he does come across as a man. And I will say this: most of the adult males in here come across as adults, the way they look, the way they carry themselves, their charisma, and the young boys, even Bobby, whatever, they come across as young men, and there's a definite difference there. So Hank's not some punk little bitch. He's the real deal. He's tall, he's physically imposing, at least the way they shot him compared to Norma. So we don't know, but again, this character had been hinted at before by Norma when she was talking to Shelly before, because they kind of have like a kindred spirit relationship. They're in the same situation. It's just that Norma's a little older. So, it seems like Norma and Shelly want to kill their husbands. But of course, Norma plays this sort of coyly. And it seems like Norma's almost going, well, I don't know how exactly I'm going to handle it. I'll just say this, but we find out a little bit later that she almost seems surprised that Hank did get parole. But that being said, Hank did a good job. And Norma, hey, Norma, you're the one that told her, but you'd give them a job, and he's my husband, so what do you think? Without really saying yes or no. So, Norma, you don't have yourself to blame on that. That's my takeaway of it. Nothing else.
Yeah, no. The next scene that that goes right after this, Dale and Harry basically stop for gas, and Dale is like, Mike said that he and Bob lived above a department store. And I believe Harry's basically like, well, I'm not too sure about that. What we need to check out the vet's office. And I believe it was Harry who said that. I could be wrong. It could have been Dale, because Dale is the big leader of the investigation. Truthfully, Harry doesn't give a lot towards it. And I just didn't write it clear enough for me to tell today. They basically go to the vet's office.
No. Yeah.
And Dale sends Andy to go get some twine. And they ask for the records, and it's the only vet's office that's close in the area, and Harry doesn't think that this could be the one, but Dale goes into how, things don't seem connected, but as you're going through, and his usual shtick, I would say.
Well, this guy at the vet, Lydecker, he was the one-armed man's boy. They're buddies, right? So all this seems to be like one giant coincidence. So when they go in there, this is kind of cool because it gets a little bit intense. Cooper decides to take all the files, confiscate them to figure it out. And he has the big speech there with Truman basically saying, hey, if two incidents come up in there, it's not basically that. And he says, the bird that attacked Laura is going to be a customer of this place. That's why they seize the files. But right before there's the serious moment, which to me really was the first serious moment in this entire episode, there's a really neat little scene where he's talking to Truman, and they're standing there getting ready to talk to the receptionist or whatever, and you'd gotten a shot of the couple people sitting in there with their pets, or whatever, and there's like this giant llama in there, herd llama, and the llama, just as the person's walking at the back, literally cuts between Truman and him, and the llama just kind of like stops for a split second and looks at him. I go, that's got to be one of those unscripted moments that they just caught the magic onto, because it's really kind of funny. And then all of a sudden it gets serious where he's talking about, oh, we're gonna go ahead and confiscate all the files too. So I'm like, oh, this is pretty good, and they got the one, so we're like, wow, things really seem like they're fast forwarding quickly.
Yeah, no, that I did laugh a bit at that. And whenever the llama turned its head, just stared at Dale a moment, and then continued walking. And it little things like that. This show definitely has its own quirkiness about it. The next scene is actually Billy and Shelly, and we know they have a thing going on. But here they're just full on making out.
She's a little naughty in here. Now she is just a very naturally gorgeous young woman. At the time, in the 80s, she was in a couple things, and obviously this is like 1990. You look at her, and she's just a radiant, totally gorgeous woman. I mean, just jumps off the screen at you, pure natural beauty, nothing fake about her at all. And she's on top of him, riding him. They got their clothes on. I mean, things are definitely heating up between these two. And she takes the gun off, and she's like, well, I thought you'd show me how to use it, because she gives Bobby the bloody shirt, or is like, oh, I know what to do with this. And it's funny because Bobby, if you go back and you look at the scene, the shirt that he's wearing has got the word dick on it or whatever. And I'm like, well, Richard, Bobby, Robert. Yeah, some people used to say dick was, a short term for Richard, for Bobby, and Bob and all that too. And I thought, wait a minute, why is he wearing that? It just was kind of like, it threw me off. But yeah, they're going at it. And you're like, okay, this just makes you think that the husbands in here are all going to get shot. I mean, or died some sort of weird death. That hasn't happened yet, but with what's going on with Norma, what's going on with Shelly, you definitely feel like that's the case.
There's also a lot of information that's expressed between the two. You're right. Shelly basically gives the shirt to Bobby because he's like, give that to me. I need this. He reveals the entire drug operation that Leo's running, and she's like, "Oh, I knew something was going on with that, with him and that shock guy. Things going around." But that's what it is. It's a lot of information getting passed. There's a lot of that this episode, and you're absolutely right. They definitely do have an attraction to each other, and I feel like it was necessary, because with how Shelly treated him like last episode, it was seeming like any kind of magic they had faded. But this definitely puts them together as a pairing, let's say. After this, we are taken back to the sheriff's office. They have, what was her name? Jane? Judy?
Lucy.
Lucy.
Lucy. Lucy and Andy have their little thing. She's not listening to them, and then they have this big thing where they're getting ready to go through all the stuff and have Lucy start looking through files. But they go down. They have this big conversation about shooting. Andy explained himself. Cooper knows that things aren't right. They talk or whatever like that, and I don't really know the point of the scene other than to maybe, fill out a little bit of, Lucy and Andy or whatever like that. But Hawk has a good line in here where they're talking about the nature of women, because Cooper, when he was asked, he says, no, I was never married. He's like, one woman can make you fly like an eagle, and another can give you the strength of the lion, but only, we said something about like a woman that can give you, one special one can give you the wisdom to know that you will have known a singular joy in your life. And I'm like, okay, that's more like philosophical, spiritual talk. But frankly, I was like, this will seem okay. Didn't really get too much out of it,
Then Hawk says, that's a poem. I wrote it for my girlfriend.
Yeah.
But no, we actually get a little bit about Dale, because Harry asks Dale if he was ever married. He was like, no, I was never married, but I did have a woman that taught me the means of commitment. what it feels like to have a broken heart. Honestly, he felt more philosophical than Hawk did in that moment when he's going on about it. But then we have Lucy. I finally got the name right. Over the speaker, and she's talking, and you realize just how small this station is, because as she's talking over it, they respond, and she's just replying right back through it.
Yep.
And it's in alphabetical order by the pets' names, which is absolutely stupid. That's how I feel anyway. But Dale looks to the others and he says, "We're going to need a lot more coffee." Now, is there anything about this scene that really, other than what you said about Hawk?
No, I feel like to me.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of that this episode. Stuff's there.
No, you're right. Like I say, maybe it's set up for, next episode or next couple ones. I don't know. Because like the next scene is like, it's kind of like that too. Shelly goes to the diner because she was on her lunch break. She's trying to get like a little nooner there, even though it's the afternoon or evening. Her and Norma are both basically kind of pissing and moaning. So they're having if we're thinking of Audrey and Donna as good girls and we're thinking of Shelly and Norma as bad girls, here you have basically the same thing happening. They're kind of almost in a way, even though they're not investigating the murder, they're kind of doing the opposite. They're almost basically inadvertently planning the murder of their husbands without really saying so, because they're saying, hey, I've got one man too many in my life and it's my husband. And they're both saying, well, we've got 4 men between us and we don't know what to do with any of them. And of course, we know Shelly's got the gun. Norma doesn't want to have anything to do with her husband coming home. So what do they do to celebrate? They don't investigate. They set up a mani-pedi date. I think that's kind of funny and realistic, but that's it. I mean, that's all the scene is, other than James, who thankfully we hadn't seen too much of. He was talking with Dawn on the phone about going over and seeing Dawn a little bit because they, quote unquote, need to talk because, she had found out some stuff, which she did. But again, another couple of minutes were just not too much going on other than Norma finding out that, Hank did get the parole. So she's like, oh, crap, So, no, I mean, that's pretty much it.
No, there's not. No, it's not. Because Madeline comes into the double R.
Oh, yes. That's right. Go ahead.
Apologies. Madeline comes in and James is on the phone and he looks at her. And it's only a side profile, really.
Yep.
But he definitely senses something. And he's like, okay, yeah, I gotta go. Hangs up the phone, goes over, and she basically calls him out, but she's very pleasant. She's very nice. Says how you think I look like Laura, don't you? Yeah, when I used to come when I was a kid, we used to pretend we were sisters. And other than that, that's about it. But the entire time while they're speaking, and it could just be because they want to set up how James is starting to feel looking at her, basically a copy of Laura, and he did care about Laura.
He was boning her, so he definitely had some kind of feelings for her. I mean, really.
Yeah.
And here it looks like he automatically is going, oh, I can't wait to bone you. And she's kind of smiling like she's playing with him a little bit. It's the vibe I got. And she was dressed in all black. So I don't know if that side profile shot that you're talking about, right when he gets off the phone, that you're right, the way they frame it, she's on the right-hand side, I think. And that made me almost immediately think that almost looked like the exact same shape we saw in the woods with Leo and when he was meeting Bobby a few episodes back when we got that split-second thing. I don't think it's related at all, but it just made me immediately think to that image, because if you weren't watching the show or paying attention, you missed it. It may not mean anything.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But the music, we don't. I know you care about music a lot in basically media. It's one of those things that you enjoy, and I absolutely understand that. But I feel like for this scene, it's basically like Laura's theme, but it's slightly
different
off,
instrument,
which is what this character is.
Yep, exactly.
And I don't know. I feel like there could be something almost menacing behind it, and I could just be overthinking it. But that music does help paint a picture, I feel. and I don't think the picture is going to end up being all too pleasant towards the end.
Well, she definitely got more screen time, so obviously I still think her importance or significance is going to be coming up here in a little bit. It's obvious that James, he's got that wandering eye in a different way than Bobby, and it's like you're a schmuck about it. At least Bobby seems more realistic. So even though Bobby's supposed to be a bad kind of guy in a way, I still think he's kind of funny. James just kind of wears on me. But yeah, I felt like she was playing him a little bit, and I'm like, okay, she doesn't seem to be too sad about what happened with Laura, but it's like I feel like she's just sort of there biding her time, which to me lends credence to what you're saying, that maybe she might be like a viper waiting to strike when the time is right about something. I don't know what. It's just a vibe, but it's a quick thing, and I had totally forgotten about it until you mentioned it. I was like, oh yeah, that's right. What was he doing on the phone? He was talking with her. Totally forgot about this interaction because it was that small on my radar. But now that you mentioned it, I went, no, okay, yeah. So anyway.
Well, I'm going to just say I don't know. I get a different vibe from oh crap, I just said his name. From James than you do. He could obviously be just a schmucky kind of guy. But I feel like he actually does care.
I do. It's just, I don't know, maybe he's just playing the hero in a very boyish sort of way. I don't mind it, but he's obviously part of the bunkhouse boys, so he's supposed to be, the good guy sticking up for the town and all that against the people that are running drugs and the evil that's in this town and how this has gone back generations has been previously mentioned. So yeah, he's supposed to be a good guy in a sense. I'm just saying that for every good person that's nobly good, like he's sort of almost acting like, that seems to be an opposite character for it. And I think it's kind of like that eternal black and white balance or whatever, good and evil. I know it sounds kind of, I think this is the episode, like you said, there's a lot of stuff there, maybe not a lot much going on, but I think this episode really, if you're not watching the show or you don't get what's going on, you go, I don't get it. This episode, I think, really does emphasize, good versus evil, black versus white, whatever you want to call it. And this, I think, is a perfect example of it, too, because, yeah, he's supposed to be the good guy, but then there's Bob, and they're both involved with the one good girl. Now, at least this one's involved with, the opposite of Laura. So, is Laura really the good girl? Is she really the bad girl? And this one, the good girl? I don't know yet. That's what makes it interesting. You can talk about these things, and it seems like it's not being cute for the sake of being cute, but I mean, it is what it is. So
absolutely. The next scene, we get back to Audrey, and Audrey is one of the most entertaining characters of this entire series, and she's
yep, I agree with
her
music's great too.
Wait, yeah, of course it is. And the way she basically acts, just the way she carries herself. Ben, her father, is working out in like their lodge, the place they live. It's hard to tell. It does look like a lodge. Audrey basically goes in and asks if he's ashamed of her, and he's like, "You're my daughter."
Yeah,
and that feels very. Thinking about it now, to just shoot it off, that sounds very much like the answer Norma gave towards her husband in court. But he says no.
Well, yeah, and the thing too is that go ahead.
Well, no, go ahead. If you have a key point, I can talk more about the scene going on. Go ahead.
Oh, what I was going to say was that the scene that struck out to me was it was funny because they had gotten rid of the Norwegians or whatever. Now they're trying to get the Swedes in, or vice versa. So I thought that was kind of funny because she'd ran off the other ones. But you can tell she's playing to me like detective because she's trying to like get in good, because of course she worms her way into getting a job at the perfume counter in this exchange. But I thought the best line, perhaps, and there's been some interesting ones and cute ones and effective ones. This one with her character and the exchange that they go through while he's like, yeah, are you ashamed of me and this and that? It was done really well, and it was hard not to kind of laugh at it, but it was so good. She's pleading with him about, hey, let's look out for the family business. I want to be a part of the family again. And it was so kind of honest and sincere in a way, even though we know she's only doing it to figure out what's going on with Laura. That's what is interesting. But the line at the end where she says to him, that convinces him, where she says something like, Daddy, please let me be your daughter again. And he's like, Okay, and then that's where she basically does it. I'm like, damn, this girl is smart. She observes people. She knows what people are about, and I think that's
And
pretty cool about her character.
yeah, and as she's like leaving the room, and she looks back and says, "Daddy, thank you." And he looks at her a moment, and she's about to go away, and he's like, "Audrey, thank you."
And that's so
He's
fake and
sold.
phony.
I feel like
I don't know.
I,
You
I
think?
don't know. I feel like he's kind of sold in this moment. It's the best he's seen her act, I suppose, since whatever the hell happened that made them
So she's selling what he's buying.
antagonistic towards
He's
each
buying
other.
what she's selling. Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Um,
can go with that.
there's another important note because he gets a call, and after she
Yep.
leaves, uh, he's talking to somebody and says, "Okay, let's meet um, down by the down by
The
the mill,
river.
I think.
Yeah.
Down by the river. Okay.
Yep. Where the
In
mill's
half an
at.
hour."
Yeah.
I thought it was going to. I was hoping that Audrey was standing. Her typical fashion is she stands by the wall and she listens in before entering the scene. I was hoping it was going to be the opposite. She left the room. She left the room, but she was still listening because she is supposed to be playing detective. Um,
Yeah.
so, but that wasn't
We'll get back
shown.
to that scene. Yeah, that's important. Very,
The
very important.
the next scene is about Waldo, the Mina bird or Mina bird, whatever. Um, it's probably the one that left the bird marks on Laura.
Because it was
And
owned by Jacques that they find out as they're all going through this paperwork. Yep.
so this entire scene, it's extremely fast paced. They
Yep.
find out the name, they get to it. They go to the address and they're
Well,
looking
before
for
that, they got a fax. Do you remember that?
facts. No, I don't
They,
remember what the
they got
facts
a
are.
fax. There was an update about what was in Laura's stomach, and it turns out it's a poker chip, and it's got the letter J on it. And they're like, they think it might be One-Eyed Jack's. They're like, well, let's go make this house call. They've got some facts they can go act on. So you're right. They do go to Jacques' house or apartment, whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
That entire bit, I do remember it now.
Yep.
And I remember them talking about it. They focus on Jay, which all I can think of is Dale's throwing the ball scene.
Yep. Yep.
And so it completely passed because I thought, okay, it's just them looking into One-Eyed Jack's. That's the contents of her stomach. It all makes sense now. But yes, they get that fax, and then they go to the address for Jock. They're looking for him. Bobby is there inside the place. And he's freaking out a moment, but he plants what he wanted to plant, I'm pretty sure, and he jumps out the window.
Yeah. Yeah.
They find the bloody jacket in there. And at that point, I don't think they know that somebody left out the window and they chased him, but they didn't catch him. At least it doesn't seem like it. The next scene
go ahead.
is the big one because that's just information that we know. I don't think there's any little thing to point out. Ben goes to the place, and it starts out us looking at a red Corvette.
Mm-hmm. A little red Corvette, which is a Prince song. Yep.
It pans and looks at Leo. Ben is meeting Leo. There's a body right there just laying against the tree. And apparently it's Bernie, Jacques' brother. Leo killed him because Leo said, "You ever say anything about me, I'll kill you." He should have believed me. So they're like, okay, we'll handle the body. And Ben's like, but I need you to burn down the mill. We have all this stuff arranged, just how we arranged it before. Pardon me. And that is pretty much it, but it's a big chunk of information because everything is connected somehow, some way.
And I think the thing Yeah, go ahead.
And this is the big connection between Ben, which is connected to Charlotte and Josie's situation, connected to Leo.
Yes. But the thing, well, Catherine, not Charlotte, I believe.
Oh, sorry.
What they're doing. That's okay. No, and it's hard getting these names straight too, because there's a ton of them. But the other thing that makes this even more detailed is that Benjamin's basically acting like he's the man in charge or whatever. But basically, even though we know he's in a bad stuff, it's now confirmed that he is, because he's being involved about what's going on, and he gives Leo the money. So okay, it looks like he's the one in charge of making sure that the mill burns, and he wants Leo to do it the right way. Leo explained that, yeah, hey, this guy wasn't too bright. I don't think he gave me up, so we're probably cool. And then Ben had made a comment about, this guy, Hank thinks you to be smart. We're like, well, who the hell's Hank? There's so many names, we don't get what's going on. So there's one more scene, but we'll go ahead and hold off for now, because that's really important that this will end on what that scene means. Because the next one is James and Donna going through the woods, and they're talking about the necklace, because they're looking for it to try to see if they had it, because Donna had heard about that vision. They find that it's not there. It's kind of neat, because this is where, and I mentioned this at the beginning of the episode, that Donna mentions that Laura and Laura's mom had the ability to sort of see things, and they weren't maybe 100% about telling people about it or whatever, but Donna is definitely familiar with it, and it seems like James is willing to accept it, and Donna says, hey, we're the only two that really loved her, so we have to do this for her. And then they kind of kiss, but there's a neat little scene where they kind of stop and they freak out, because there's an owl, and it cuts up to the owl, and it comes back, and then they kiss. So not much there, but then the very last scene, you've got Josie getting the phone call from Harry, and he's asking, hey, were you at this place? And she's like, oh, call me tomorrow, and kind of hangs up on her or whatever. And Pete and her have a moment about making a turkey sandwich and doing a fishing contest or whatever. But she's going through mail. There's the picture of that domino with that double threes, the cream number 33 that you had mentioned that we saw earlier. And who had that earlier? That was Hank, because the phone rings when it cuts to the guy Hank, who's Norma's husband, coming ready to come out, and he's sitting there just sucking on the domino that looks like that or whatever, and she just sort of kind of is like, yeah, whatever, doesn't say anything. So you're like, damn it! Not only is Hank kind of come out, maybe get whacked, he's got something going on with Josie, so maybe they were having an affair, and maybe that's how Josie's husband died. I don't remember. But damn, this thing is really, really getting deep. So you're right, it tied it all together, and it seems like this character that we have not seen, Hank, seems to be the real big ringleader when it comes to the whole Josie, Mill, Catherine, Ben angle to it. Wow.
Yeah, you just basically explained it all. That is a whole lot of information to process, and I know that the people of Twin Peaks think it's a tragedy, and I'm going to have to go around and talk to people about it. But
so as we finish up this episode, let me ask you a couple of questions. Like I said, we're more than halfway through now. We've got a couple more episodes till the end of the first season's over. I know you said that you're interested in watching it. Do you feel that for a TV show that would come out today, that this would be way too much information by today's standards? Because I don't know if I know of a show today that has this kind of level of detail.
No, you're absolutely right. A lot of shows on true television do not have a lot of things like this. I can think of a few good ones that come close, but nothing quite holds a cigar to this. It's truly, I've wanted to watch this a long time. I said that when we started this series, and I absolutely felt like it was worth the wait. I'm so glad that we've gotten around to it. And honestly, out of all the series that we talk about doing season 2s to, this might be one that we have to consider, even though they get a bigger block in the next season. I feel like this story continues to progress, and I feel like by the end of this, we're going to need more.
Well, there's definitely a lot of hardcore Twin Peaks fans out there. A lot of people that watched it originally, like I did. So for me, it'd been forever since I rewatched it, but I had the urge. And so the fact that you're a lot younger, as I like to say, the millennial in the group, and that this is a first watch where you don't really know too much about it. Like, I don't believe you know the answer to who killed Laura Palmer, even though it's been told to us, like in the first or second episode, it's Bob or Mike or whoever through a dream or whatever. And we're finding that dreams and hardcore detective work seem to be aligning, but we're not 100% sure what to go on. So we'll see. I will just say that it gets really crazier in season 2. Maybe that's in a good way or maybe not, but hardcore fans that have tuned in and responded on Twitter with me, it's affected them enough where, I can tell that they're really interested in about what's going on, and the mythology of it is just very detailed. And I appreciate that it was one of those shows that, took on a life of its own, because like back in the late 70s, early 80s, you had Who Shot JR, which is J.R. Ewing from Dallas, which is huge. That was, I think, the first show since the late 60s when we found out from The Fugitive, not just that the one-armed man did it, but the one-armed man was captured. And Philip Gerard basically says to David Jansen, who plays the fugitive, Richard Kimball, basically says, "Yeah, you're right," and that's it. That was the highest rated show for like ever until Who Shot JR. I may be wrong on this, but this approximate. I think there's been something since Who Shot JR. It might be an episode of Lost or something. I'm not sure, but that's how powerful these things were, and it was not because of Twitter or the internet. It's because of word of mouth with this Twin Peaks. So we'll see about doing season 2. I'm certainly not against it. I think it's a very interesting show. It's really focused me to pay attention more, which I don't have to do too much in shows these days. So it's interesting that. Like I say, the level of detail they have in here, because going back, I thought, oh yeah, it's going to be a few of these and some of this and that. And it's like, no, everybody's got a role. It all somehow seems to be fitting in, and there's nothing wasted by it. So maybe we just don't know. It's entertaining. I've really enjoyed it a lot too. So I want to thank you for showing up there, Professor Pixel, for everybody else watching, especially the new people that are really hardcore Twin Peaks fans. The best thing you do to show your appreciation is retweet it, get the word out about the Xtreme Movie Show, where we primarily are an 80s-based movie channel that branches out a little bit into some classic TV and some classic movies, science fiction and horror and whatnot too. So if you have anything you'd like us to cover, let us know in the comments. Same thing with about Twin Peaks. We may get to where we start doing Twin Peaks live. Right now, we're just doing it offline and getting it up there, but we're getting some great numbers. Really appreciate that. So I'd like to thank everybody for listening. I'd like to thank everybody involved with the Xtreme Movie Show. I'd like to say thanks, and as always, have a good night.
Stay extreme. I'm going to hitch a ride now.
There you go. Yeah.